target towards which we're working. Awesome. Management plans are those shorter duration, how we get to the goals, strategies, and we'll have many meetings with stakeholders and in rooms just like this over the next several years developing them. So this is just going to be an introduction, a preview. What are these management plans? What are some of their components? What are we going to be coming back and talking with folks about later? And of course, we'll close. And as you just heard, today's meeting is being recorded, and it's going to be posted to the department's website here within a few days. All right, next slide. All right, so before we move on, we want to introduce ourselves. My name is Olga Hart. I'm the AMA Director of Establishments and Data. And with me, moving from left to right, we have Brendan Thalman, Establishment Supervisor, Dennis Troutman, Outreach Coordinator, Ben Bryce, Special Advisor to Director Bushatsky. You got an upgrade. And Madison Moreno, Establishments Coordinator. And we also have Shauna Evans, who some of you met when you came in and signed in. She's our Public Information Officer. And Enrique Rivera, providing us with stellar IT support and hanging out in the wings in case we have any other snafus. All right, next slide. I think I might have missed something very funny. Oh, there's a duck in the room. That is a new one. Okay, keeping us on our toes. All right, so before we go ahead and get started and really dive in deep, like I said, this is going to be a much more conversational meeting, but we do need to read these meeting logistics off to you because they are important. So we're holding this presentation today to answer questions, to provide public information, receive your feedback, but this is not comprehensive guidance. We cannot give you legal advice in this meeting. If you have any legal questions related to your individual specific circumstances, you should consult with your own attorney. Next slide. All right. Additionally, in the interest of time, unless you have clarifying questions or you can't hear, or are there any other logistical snafus you want to flag, please hold your questions and comments until the Q&A portion of this presentation and the discussion portion, so we can keep it running on time and get everyone out of here in a timely fashion. Like I said, if you have specific questions about your individual circumstances, those are best addressed by phone or by email. We have contact information, and we'll all provide that at the very end. That's the best way to get those really specific questions about your own well, your own water rights addressed. Please be respectful to others, so to AWR staff here today and to your fellow stakeholders and participants. When we get to the Q&A and the discussion part, we're going to invite folks to come up. We'll provide a mic. Please speak into it so you can hear each other, and the folks online can hear you as well. And like I said, today's meeting is being recorded, and we'll be posting that recording on the Ranegras AMA website here within a few days. All right, and with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Ben to walk us through some of those lingering questions, public concerns that came up previously.
Thank you. All right, you can go to the next one. I'm not going to talk a lot. Can you hear me? Is this loud enough? Excellent. Great. I'm not going to talk a lot today. Thank you for laughing. The real experts are here with me, right? These are the folks who really understand how active management areas work. They work with active management areas every single day. But what I do want to do is talk about some of the concerns that came up when we were last here, and some of the questions that we heard in comments that were submitted after the formal hearing. The first one, this is a quote that was in one of the comments we received. It was a question. How long, they asked, until DWR slaps on the transfer basin feature? We can't do that. That's not a thing. But I recognize It's a legitimate concern. So we want to make sure we talk about it today. What that means, what it doesn't mean. Would you hit the next slide for me, please, Dennis? Or Brandon. Transfer basins are a very specific thing in the law. A transfer basin is a groundwater basin that the legislature has decided you can pump groundwater from that basin to send it to an initial AMA. When I say initial AMA, what I mean is an active management area that was first created when the legislature created AMAs at all. Tucson is one, Phoenix is one, the Pinal active management area is one. And when that was done, there was this decision made. We're not here. We don't want it to be the policy that you can pump rural groundwater to send to Phoenix. I grew up in a rural area. That makes a lot of sense to me. But the legislature did say we are going to set aside some rural basins as those transfer basins. Those basins will be allowed to pump water to send it, for example, to Phoenix. But that can only happen if the legislature passes it in statute. That's done in the statute books right here. I can't change this book. DWR cannot change this book, right? So the answer to the question, how soon before we do that? Never going to happen. We cannot do that. Now, is the Ranegras Plain groundwater basin a transfer basin? The answer is no. There are transfer basins awfully close by, but not Ranegras Plain. That's important. We wanted to stress that. Each transfer basin has its own rules too. It's not necessarily open season for anybody. So everyone is different, everyone is distinct, but Ranegras Plain is not one. Could you hit the next slide for me? Thanks, Brandon. The next one, another real concern. We want to make sure we touch on this. Someone asked us, I think this was the wink, wink, nod, nod question we referenced, right? A gentleman asked, is there a plan to pump our water and send it to Phoenix? And part of that, other people also said, so you're coming here, you're telling us that you want to reduce how much water we can use, and the worry is so that you can send it to somebody else, right? You want to curtail our use so someone else can take it, right? That's the big concern, one of them. That's not a plan. That's not a thing. That's not how AMAs work. A, it's not a transfer basin. But B, there is no provision in the active management areas that allows us to stop the residents, right? To target the residents who are there so that it can be saved for somebody else. When water is used in an active management area, it is subject to what are called conservation measures. And those conservation measures apply to all the different types of uses, whether that's an agricultural use or an industrial use or a municipal use. Now, the requirements are going to be different because those are different types of uses, right? You'll require different kinds of conservation of a farmer than you would for a municipality, for example. But everyone's subject to conservation, right? There's no provision to single out one type of user as the one we're going to knock down so that we can save it for somebody else, right? This is not what the AMA is for, and it is certainly not to allow for the water to be saved so that it can be sent to Phoenix, right? You can hit the next one. Thanks. Another one. This one was raised with us. We've had some really, really smart folks come and talk to us and say, let's talk about this idea of the status quo, right? You're just locking in the status quo. An AMA is going to impose costs, but it's not going to solve anything. That's not quite right. An active management area does grandfather in existing uses. That's certainly true, right? Farmers who are already irrigating or who have made substantial capital investments to begin irrigating will be grandfathered into the program. Industrial uses that are already here can be grandfathered into the program, right? So there are certainly elements that are getting grandfathered in. However, it is certainly not the status quo. Number one, It stops who can come in, right? That there can be unlimited new pumping, which was the case prior to the creation of an active management area. There was no limitation to who could show up and drop another well, right? That's significantly different. And two, and we're going to be talking about this more today, there are conservation programs, like I said, that will apply. And those programs are intended to reduce the amount of water that is used over time, to reduce that overdraft that's causing problems. So those are important elements that we want to note. This is not just the status quo. Things are going to be different. Now, certainly some things are going to stay in some ways the same, but it is not the status quo. And you can hit the next one, please. Okay. Will the community have input on the draft management goal and plan? Yes, 100%. That's why we're here at all, right? We need to know how the community feels about what we're doing, and we're going to need input, and not where we're just going to roll out with something and say, let us know now what you think. We will be here continually over time, sharing iterations with you, sometimes tripping over ourselves. That's kind of how we've done it in other places too, as we work out the kinks. But ideally, what that allows is for us to work with you and you to work with us to figure out a management plan, right? Or excuse me, a management goal, how we're looking towards the future of this basin, and a management plan, which are going to be the rules that would apply, the regulations that would apply for groundwater withdrawals. So those are things that we're absolutely going to need from y'all. Additionally to that, there will be a committee of folks who have understanding of the local situation, who would also help us in the creation of that plan, or in the evaluation of that plan. So there's going to be lots of opportunities for public input. So that's it for me. I'll pass it back over to Olga.
All right, thank you, Ben. I'm giving this microphone a second to wake up. All right, so before we dive deep into all of the components, all of the requirements of what it now means to be in an active management area, if you can go next slide, we wanted to go back. Some of these are slides that, for those of you that have been here in October and November with us, some of these will be familiar, but we wanted to start at basics and offer a little bit of a refresher. So that big blue book that Ben was holding up, right? Where does the water law for groundwater come from? Where does AWR get its authority? How are all of these AMA rules, where do they come from? And they come from the Groundwater Management Act of 1980. So that is what created the Arizona Department of Water Resources and imposed regulations statewide, including in active management areas. Next slide. So again, those of you that have been in this room before have seen this table before as well. We like to think as the water management framework in the state of Arizona is stacking. So as you move from left to right, from statewide all the way to AMAs, you build the framework, you build the scaffolding, you build the tools in your toolbox for regulating and protecting water supplies. And that far right-hand column you see in orange under the active management areas, that's what Brendan is going to be walking us through here in a bit, right? So what are the requirements for groundwater management in an AMA, and what are some of the protections that AMA offers? Next slide. There are 8 AMAs now, including Ranegras. So we have 5 initial AMAs, Prescott, Phoenix, Pinal, and Tucson. Those were created in the Act in 1980. And then in 1994, Santa Cruz was split out of Tucson. So it's still considered an initial AMA because that land was initially included by the 1980 Act. And we have 3 subsequent AMAs. So we've established Douglas in 2022, Wilcox in 2025, and then most recently here in Ranegras earlier this year in 2026. And you'll notice possibly, if you go next slide, on that previous slide, we made a distinction, right, between the initial AMAs and the subsequent AMAs. And there's a relevant distinction here. There's a little bit of a difference. So they share many similarities. They're both active management areas. So the majority of requirements, the majority of the protections hold true. So there's, in both initial and subsequent AMAs, there is a restriction on the expansion of agricultural acreage. There are management goals, management plans, conservation requirements. There's a GAC, but the distinction is subsequent AMAs tend to be more flexible. So a lot of the things that are hard coded into statute right there in that blue book for the initial AMAs and subsequent AMAs can be a conversation, right? So for the initial AMAs, the management goals are hard coded, they're written into statute. They themselves are written into statute, whereas subsequent AMAs can be designated by the director or voted in locally. And some of those differences, some of that flexibility is what we're going to be talking about today, right? That is why we can have this conversation about what the management goal for the AMA is going to look like, what some of the conservation provisions in the management plan will look like, because subsequent AMAs have that additional flexibility. And then as a final note too, subsequent AMAs don't have groundwater withdrawal fees, which is something that the initial AMAs do. Next slide. All right. And this is a little bit of a repeat, right, of what we just talked about. So much more flexibility in subsequent AMAs, even though they're hitting many of those same, top level check boxes, there's a lot more opportunity to have this be a collaborative, co-design, co-building conversation with local stakeholders. All right. And before I hand it off to Brendan, so just to recap, right, where we all are, center ourselves a little bit. So the Ranegras AMA officially established on February 4th, 2026, as I'm sure all of you know here, located in La Paz County and Yuma County, covers approximately 912 square miles, and we estimate has a population of a little over 1,200 residents. All right. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Brendan, who's going to walk us through in much better detail what those requirements are.
Thank you, Olga. I'm going to stand up because I've been sitting all day. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. As Olga introduced before, I'm Brandon Thalman. I am the AMA Establishment Supervisor. And yeah, let's get started on the components of an AMA. So there are a few definitions that we want to be aware of before we start really getting into the nitty-gritty of all of this. The first one is to irrigate, is the application of water to 2 or more acres of land to produce plants or parts of plants for sale or human consumption, or for use as feed for livestock. I've said that countless times. I can recite it very easily. This is just a definition that the department uses to standardize who we determine is and isn't irrigating. So that is the definition that is going to tell you whether or not you likely have to apply for grandfathered rights, maybe have to start thinking about conservation requirements. So that is a very important definition. A grandfathered right is a right to withdraw and use groundwater based on lawful withdrawals and use of groundwater prior to the designation of the active management area. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Whoever was lawfully withdrawing use pursuant to irrigation would be grandfathered in. So that's why it's called a grandfathered right. The next one is an exempt well. This is a well with a pump capacity of 35 gallons per minute or less, which is used to withdraw groundwater for non-irrigation purposes. So any use that does not fit that irrigate definition above. An exempt well may not exceed 10 acre-feet per year for non-irrigation purposes. So there is a limitation to an exempt well. You just can't go over 10 acre-feet per year, which is about 3.25 million gallons. A typical household will only really use 1.5 to 2 acre-feet of water per year, which is something you want to keep in mind. But yeah, this is for purposes other than domestic uses and stock watering. We had one more. Go back a little bit. Yep. All right. Acre foot. So this is a unit of volume that we use to measure a lot of the water that we talk about. And that 3.25 million gallons I mentioned before is just an acre foot times 10, which is 325,851 gallons. All right, next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the prohibition on expansion of irrigated acres. So this is what we were talking about before, where when an AMA goes into place, we basically shut the door on any sort of new irrigated acreage. So the director issued an order to initiate proceedings to establish an active management area here on November 5th, 2025, which then established a prohibition on the irrigation of any acres that weren't legally irrigated within those prior 5 years. So going forward, and for the purposes of applying for grandfathered rights, only acres of land that were legally irrigated at any time between November 5th, 2020 and November 5th, 2025 can be irrigated going forward. So that's typically what we look at when we're analyzing applications for grandfathered right and whether people are eligible for that. And as of the establishment of the Ranegras Plain AMA on February 4th, this prohibition is actually in effect permanently. So it's permanently part of the AMA in the Ranegras Plain. Just a quick reminder down there, irrigate, is to apply water to 2 or more acres of land for plants or parts of plants. Next slide. All right, so who is allowed to use groundwater? Well, it kind of depends on what type of well you use. The first one we're going to talk about is a non-exempt well, so a well that is not exempt from AMA regulation. So within an AMA, a person may withdraw groundwater from a well having a pump with a maximum capacity of greater than 35 gallons per minute. So those larger agricultural or those larger industrial wells designed to pump a lot of water, only if the person holds a right or permit to withdraw the groundwater. So in a nutshell, this just means that if you want it to use a non-exempt well going forward, you will need a certificate of grandfathered right to do that. And this also includes any person irrigating 2 or more acres or using 10 or more acre feet for a non-irrigation use. They must also hold a grandfathered right or withdrawal permit, and that's what the application for grandfather right process is going to be going forward. Quick reminder though, if you could go back one more slide. So you'll see this red text down here, failure to apply for a grandfathered right by the deadline, which is May 4th, Star Wars Day next year, will result in the waiver and relinquishment of any right to use groundwater. That's kind of scary for a lot of people if we don't talk about some nuances there. So any right to use groundwater, it should include pursuant to a grandfathered right. So it basically just means if you don't apply for a grandfathered right, you can't use groundwater for the purposes of a grandfathered right. And this typically exempts household and domestic use. But if you have anything other than like a household use or you're not quite sure, it's definitely best to go to our website and go to our facts page and look that up. All right, next slide. Okay, so the next one, we're going to talk about exempt wells. So generally, a person may withdraw groundwater for a non-irrigation use from a well having a pump with a maximum capacity of 35 gallons per minute or less without the right or permit. So this is where we're talking about household or domestic uses. Typically, they use smaller wells. However, there's some limitations on the use of exempt wells within AMAs, and some of those are only one exempt well can be used to serve the same use at the same location. So you can't just put a bunch of exempt wells on a piece of land and just pump as much water as you want. And also withdrawals from an exempt well for a non-irrigation purpose other than domestic use and stock watering are still limited to that 10 acre feet per year threshold. Next slide. All right. So just to recap, an exempt well is a smaller well that has a pump capacity of 35 gallons per minute or less, uses less than 10 acre feet per year for non-irrigation use, is not used to irrigate 2 or more acres of land, and still actually has that responsibility to register your well and document any well modifications or changes to well ownership. And they are also exempt from the requirement to obtain a grandfathered right or withdrawal authority. They're exempt from requirement to measure and report withdrawals, and they are also exempt from conservation requirements in the management plan. So all of these things are kind of pointing to a use that is not large enough to be regulated in the AMA. Next slide. All right. So the Ranegras Plain AMA was established as a subsequent AMA as of February 4th, 2026. Within a subsequent AMA, only acres of land that were legally irrigated at any time during that 5-year period, November 5th, 2020 to November 5th, 2025, may be irrigated with any water going forward, except as provided below. So acres of land that were not irrigated during the relevant 5-year period may be irrigated with a decreed or appropriative surface water right established before the date of the notice of the initiation of designation procedures. That's quite the lengthy thing, but that is kind of just pointing to if you have any sort of surface water right, that is something that you would want to look into. And any acres of land not irrigated during the relevant 5-year period can be considered irrigated if a substantial capital investment was made to bring the land into irrigation within a particular window of time. So this just means that if you have acres that you would like to have grandfathered in, but they don't have that required history within those 5 years, we do have an avenue that you could get those acres grandfathered in. Because we do realize that when an AMA is designated, it's kind of sudden. So if you were in the middle of preparing your land for irrigation and had done a bunch of work, spent a lot of money to prepare your land to be irrigated, that is something that you can submit to us with your application for grandfathered right, and we'll take a look at that, analyze it, and we can get those acres grandfathered in that way. But there are some nuances there that we'll talk about here in a second. Yeah, let's see. So, yep, a couple seconds. So, substantial capital investment. The department understands that what is substantial to one person might not be substantial to another, and vice versa. And it's because of this that these cases are very, very fact specific and very case by case. So it's really tough for us to make SCI or substantial capital investment recommendations for individual circumstances. So that's one thing that we really, we can give you as much information as we can, but we can't really advise either way on specific circumstances. We would just need to have all that stuff submitted to us, and we can make that determination from there. Property owners who believe they may qualify for SCI must apply to ADWR by submitting that attachment I was talking about with their grandfathered right application. And then from there, we'll evaluate each application on a case-by-case basis. The particular statutory language is down below in that black lettering. Acres of land will be deemed to have been in irrigation if SCI was made between November 5th, 2020 and November 5th, 2025. So any work or money spent to prepare your land for irrigation in that same time frame is what we're going to be looking at. It could include on-site irrigation distribution facilities. It could be well work. It could be fencing. Anything that you think might have contributed to preparing your land for irrigation is something that we will certainly look at. Next slide. All right. So again, we want to reiterate that the application deadline for applications for grandfathered right is on May 4th next year. There is no room in statute for us to accept late applications. So this is why I want to remind everyone as often as possible that the deadline is May 4th, 2027. We'll be talking about this every meeting going forward, and we'll be reminding you guys. So just a recap of what types of grandfathered rights there are. There's the irrigation and the non-irrigation. The irrigation one is based on that historic use between November 5th, 2020 and November 5th, 2025. and that is for water use particular to the application of water to 2 or more acres of land for plants or parts of plants. Non-irrigation grandfathered rights is any high volume water use that's not related to agriculture or growing plants in the ground. And that is also based on the amount of water, the highest amount of water used in any one of those 5 years between that same period. Next slide. All right, so some more critical information here. Again, that deadline is May 4th next year. And yeah, this is kind of the statutory language that kind of tells us that we can't accept any late applications. So as we move along through the process of talking to you guys, scheduling meetings, doing application workshops, everything that we do to help build relationships with you guys and help you out going forward, we will help you with all of that stuff. So, next slide. Okay. Metering and reporting. So this is something else that is also included in an AMA. With a few narrow exceptions, persons withdrawing groundwater from non-exempt wells, so those wells that are greater than 35 gallons per minute, are required to measure their groundwater withdrawals with a measuring device and method that is approved by ADWR and must annually report the groundwater withdrawals to ADWR. An approved measuring device must be installed by March 31st, 2026. We can get into some details there too. Requirements for water measuring devices can be found on our website. They're in ARS 45-604 and in our administrative code. And persons withdrawing groundwater from exempt wells for non-irrigation use generally are not required to measure and report the groundwater withdrawals. So again, that's things like domestic and household use, which is not enough water for us to really regulate, keep an eye on, all that stuff. All right, well spacing requirements for non-exempt wells and AMAs. An application for a permit to drill a new large non-exempt well in an AMA must be denied if the proposed well would cause unreasonably increasing damage to surrounding land and other water uses. So this is our way of making sure in an AMA that if a very large well is drilled, it's not going to have an adverse impact on things that are surrounding it. For example, other wells that it could be close to, people's land, other water users. ADWR has adopted rules for this in the administrative code, defining what is unreasonably increasing damage. So if you have a very complicated case, it might be a good idea to go into those and kind of do that research there. And all of this is actually referred to as a well impact analysis. And it's something that our wells team at the department kind of takes charge of. They accept applications, they know about all that stuff. And more information can be found on their website, and that is azwater.gov/permitting and wells. Next slide. All right. Assured Water Supply Program. This is a program that comes with each AMA. And this is a program that requires the demonstration of 100-year water supply for new housing subdivisions to provide consumer protection for homeowners. So this is just our way of making sure that no irresponsible subdivision companies move into the AMA, create subdivisions, and then within 10 years, all of those houses don't have water. So it's one of our best ways to protect homeowners that way. And the requirements for this certificate of assured water supply is they need to prove that there's physical water in the ground for 100 years. They need to legally prove that, and that availability needs to be continuous. The company needs to prove that they have the financial capability to provide that water. They also need to work with DEQ, I believe, to prove that that water is of safe quality. And they, of course, need to abide by the management plan and management goal for the AMA. So this is just a very comprehensive way for us to hold companies accountable that put subdivisions into an AMA. Next slide. All right, this is the big one. So we're going to talk about management goals, plans, and conservation programs. So in an AMA, we create a management goal, and that is where we want to be in a certain set of years, a certain time frame, and other metrics there. So if we have our goal in sight, how do we reach that goal? What do we need? Well, the next thing that we need is a plan to meet that goal, right? So that contains policies, conservation requirements, but we want to go one step deeper, right? So what is in the plan? How do we execute a plan to get to that management goal? And that's where we develop conservation programs. So this is all kind of proof that subsequent AMAs are flexible enough to really take into account the unique qualities of a subbasin. Not all basins are created equally. There are differences that we need to navigate, and that's how we can design those conservation programs to meet our unique goal using our unique management plan with our unique conservation programs. There are some baseline conservation programs there, but we do have the flexibility in subsequent AMAs to really tailor the AMA to the basin and their needs. All right. I will hand it off to Madison for the next segment. Oh, Olga. Olga's next.
Thanks, Brendan. All right, folks, that was a lot of information. Just want to reiterate, all of these slides are going to be posted online. So the recording of the meeting is going to be online, but also PDF of all of these slides will be online. And Brendan mentioned this, but just to flag it, for those that might have missed it, there was a lot of talk, there were a lot of red boxes about deadlines, right, and those not being flexible, and that is all very true. But Brendan also mentioned that we are going to be coming back and having multiple rounds of workshops to help people understand the application process, answer any questions. So, just to put a little bit of that possible anxiety at ease. Like I said, right, we just went over a lot of content. We're getting very close to the active discussion Q&A portion. So this next section, we're going to be talking about the proposed management goal that we bring today from our director to the basin. All right, so before we jump in, Brendan did a really good job of kind of setting us up and queuing us up. What is a management goal? The only additional thing I'll add on this slide, I'm not going to read it verbatim, is that there is one goal. There's a one long-term goal for the basin, and there are progressive, successive management plans with different conservation requirements that will evolve and build on each other over time. But there is one goal, right? One North Star, one kind of long-term target to which we're moving. Next slide. All right. So again, a little bit of background before we present the draft goal and invite your feedback, just to make sure, we're all kind of talking on the same level, on the same page. What does a management goal look like? So it has this template or this framework, right? It includes three primary things. It includes the actual goal, right? So what's the desired outcome? And it's usually, like I said, long-term, because this goal is being set for the long-term period. It's not a 5-year goal. It's not a 10-year goal. It's kind of the permanent, basically, goal for the basin. And it has a specific measurable objective. So some action that can be measured, frequently quantified, and it has a timeline. So it needs to include some time component, right? What objective you want to reach, and by when do you want to reach it by? Next slide. All right. And then some additional principles, right? So these are some of the things to keep in mind as you reflect and react to the preliminary draft goal we propose, as you think through what alternative goals you might want to propose for your basin. So what should a management goal do, right? What are some best practices for what it should include? Well, the first and most important one, possibly upper left-hand corner, it should respond to the issues that led us to the creation of the AMA in the first place, right? And in most basins, that root cause is the overdraft of groundwater. So too much water coming in, not enough water coming out. So the goal should really speak to how are we going to change the situation over the long term, right? To kind of bring us back from the edge there. Like I said, it should be measurable and it should contain evaluation criteria. If you guys have heard of SMART goals, right, it should be something we can track progress towards. Specific enough so we can identify over time whether we're getting closer, whether we're getting further from it, and are we on track, and through management plans and conservation program, revisions or updates over time, can we track to that goal? Like I said, it has to provide a timeline. We don't want it to be entirely open-ended. And it has to be achievable and it has to be appropriate for the Ranegras plain, right? So a management goal that might be achievable and appropriate for Phoenix might not be achievable and appropriate here, which is part of this conversation we're having today, right? And inviting comments from you all, from folks online and folks that couldn't make it, but we invite written comments too, right? What is achievable here? What makes sense here, and what's appropriate here. And then finally, it has to be legally, it has to be legal, right? And it has to be reasonable and defensible. So, nothing too crazy. It has to meet all of these principles to be a strong goal. Next slide. All right, so we talked about, right, we just mentioned what might be appropriate, say, in Phoenix, might not be appropriate in Ranegras. So to provide a little bit more, context, a little bit of more awareness, here on the screen, you'll see some of those management goals for initial AMAs. If you remember in the beginning of this presentation, we mentioned the management goals for initial AMAs were hard-coded into statute, right? This is a different conversation. We're having it, we're developing it together. You're going to have an opportunity to provide feedback, but not going to read them verbatim. The main points we want to make sharing these goals for the initial AMAs is that note that each one is different, right? There are some commonalities. Mostly they are all trying to, in one way or another, on one timeline or another, reduce the overdraft of groundwater. And improve, water resources sustainability, but they have different targets, right? They have some talk to save fields, some do not, like in Pinell. They prioritize different economic futures, different priorities in the different basins. Next slide. And we see that diversity in the subsequent AMAs as well. So we have the Douglas AMA goal that has been adopted. And we have the draft Wilcox AMA goal, right, that has been presented once to stakeholders, has been adapted since then based on their feedback, and is still in draft, right? It's still subject to revision. And you'll notice that these two goals are also different. So they're different from the initial AMAs, but they're also different from each other. So again, we're not going to read these off verbatim. These are really more just there to provide some additional context. How have other stakeholders and subsequent AMAs reflected on their basin's challenges, and what kinds of goals have they come to? And again, just the fact that these are different, they are intended to be adapted to each basin. Slide. All right. A little bit of, kind of formal FYIs. How is the management goal going to be adopted? So today we present it on behalf of the AWR director, who needs to propose a management goal for the AMA. So the management goal, some target, and the number of years in which that management goal needs to be achieved. So you'll see this on the next slide in the goal language. Today's meeting is that official initial proposal of a draft. And we're going to be accepting comments and responses and discussion today in the room from folks online who may, want to unmute or leave written comments. And we would love to get written comments as well. Just to put a little bit of a timeline on there, right? We're requesting those initial comments through March 31st, 2026, but this goal is not set in stone until it's formally adopted. And so there will be opportunities on a rolling basis to provide updates to this draft goal, to additional revised drafts, and we'll continue engaging in that dialogue. So then, without further ado, here is that draft management goal for the Ranegras AMA that we are presenting to you all today on behalf of the AWR director. And that is to support the long-term economy and welfare of water users in the basin by prolonging the life of the aquifer through a reduction of groundwater overdraft by 50% in 50 years. And we're going to leave that slide up here just for a minute to let folks, read it, reflect on it. All right. And with that, if you can go to the next slide, awesome. With that, we're going to invite comments. We invite discussion. We just, for kind of everyone's awareness, before we start passing out the mics, we have a Q&A period reserved at the end of the presentation. So we'll have a few additional slides after this to get through. So any questions you had about, let's say, exempt wells or non-exempt wells, right? Applications for grandfathered rights, those kinds of questions we'd like to ask you to hold until the end. But for now, we'd like to have a conversation about this initial goal, and we can put that slide, back up on the screen. That little blue text box right there, just recall as we have this conversation, as you offer your feedback, right? Some of the things the goal needs to be, it needs to be quantitative, it needs to have a target, it needs to have a timeline, it needs to be legal, reasonable, and defensible. But kind of within those, parameters, there is opportunity to provide feedback. And we'll also just say, sometimes the goal can be a little bit abstract to react to. One of the things we've heard in formal comments and informal comments were very different perspectives from different people about what the future of this basin looks like. And I think that might be a good place to start this conversation, right? One of the criteria that leads the director to designate an AMA is finding the active management practices, right, or an AMA is necessary to preserve existing supplies of groundwater for future needs, right? So that really begs the question, what are the future needs of this basin that you see, that you feel strongly about? We've already heard different perspectives, right, from different folks who live and work here about what those different needs are, how they are to be prioritized. So we invite, direct feedback, direct revisions to the goal language itself. We also invite a conversation about what is the future of the basin, and then we can work together backwards to, how does that translate into a goal that makes sense, that can help you all meet those future needs, and how water, resources fits into that. So we're going to go ahead and get started in the room. If folks want to speak, if you can just raise your hand, and I'm happy to run the mic over to you. Oh, sorry about that.
Okay.
Do you want to do the mic running?
Now let's see if this is, there we go.
Okay. Oh, whoops. We'll get it back up here in a second. All right. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so just in reading this to start off with, I appreciate that we have something to start with. I like to think of myself as a fairly intelligent person, but 50% in 50 years doesn't tell me anything. I don't know what that means. Is that attainable? Was that based off of facts and figures that you have put together? With those numbers the way they are, I don't know whether we could go up or we could go down. I don't have any context to that. So could you add context to it for us?
That's a great question. So the question was, can we add context to the 50% in 50 years? And what was the basis for that? What does that look like? So if you all recall, Ryan Mitchell, AWR's chief hydrologist, who presented at the October informal hearing or meeting, and then the formal hearing as well, shared some estimates from the department, right, about average annual inflow into the basin, average annual outflows. That's kind of where the basis of there being about a 9.4, a factor of close to 10 times more outflow or groundwater pumping that inflow came from. So kind of translating that 50%, right? Our goal would be to cut that in half in 50 years. I agree with you, right? This is very much intended to be a starting point, and how far, whether this is not far enough or whether this is, too far, that is the discussion we're inviting from all of you.
Is that 50% in 50 years projected to be attainable? It's nice to have a goal. I mean, we could say we want it to cut by 100%, but is 100% attainable? Not likely. Is 50% attainable based on the numbers? That's the part I'm not recalling from
I
what you're saying.
understand. Okay, so thank you. So one of the slides that Brendan had put up, and if you all don't mind, maybe we can go back to them, the management goal, management plan, conservation program wheel. Here we go. So to the question of, is it attainable? We don't intend for this to be attained passively, right? So the goal will drive the development of the management plan's conservation requirements. So we're not, so those conservation requirements are going to be developed directly in response to the goal to move water use in the basin or, recharge in the basin to meet the goal. I don't know if anyone else, Ben, Madison, if any of you would like to add anything to that, because that was a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, I can kind of go into more of this fun circle chart. So really the management goal helps inform what we write into that management plan and how we produce those conservation requirements that are into those conservation programs that I'll go into a little bit later once we kind of move past this discussion portion. But what we design in those conservation programs are supposed to help drive moving towards that goal. These management plans, they're not supposed to flip the switch overnight, which we understand is quite a hard task in kind of both directions. But we know that it's going to take a while. It's going to take time to adjust, and this first management plan is supposed to be more of a transition period for everyone.
So on this plan of taking it out 50 years, myself, I would like to see that those goals are broken down into smaller increments that end up at a 50%. Because right now you're saying in 50 years, we're going to drop it by 50%. So where is the gradual decreases on that? Because everybody could say, well, we have till year 49. Instead of something that shows more gradual progression within the goal. Because right there, that's too long, it's too wide, it is too much time. So I know that's 1% a year for 50 years. So I believe the goals should be reflective of that. So we see a 1%, if it is that we see that 1% reduction every single year within the goal. Okay. And my other question is, you talked about once this gets figured out, that it gets adopted. So who adopts it?
Oh, of course. We go through a formal adoption period. We'll have more meetings quite like this. They're a little more formal, and we'll formally adopt that management goal. ADWR. It will be included with your all's input like we're having today. We'll be building off of like this starting point, moving forward with this. We do have to adopt the goal within 2 years of the AMA establishment. That is statutory. And that is just our formal rule process. Yes. You're not wrong. There you go.
Okay. My name's Dave Derflinger. I live off of 42E up here. And I know a little something about the desert. It's hot out here and there ain't much water. I'm really glad that you guys stepped forward and took charge of this problem because it was a wild, wild west before you guys came along. You had these idiots from California that were going to drill wells, pump the water out, create liquid hydrogen and send it to LA and run their city buses on it. Oh boy, we're really green. We're really green. Well, you know what? They're destroying our environment in favor of people in LA. That ain't the way to go. Now, honestly, I've been standing back and watching everything, and I'm on the list, and I get the emails and everything. Okay. Mr. Deuce, who spoke the last time we all were here, he was right. He said, nothing's going to change. You can do all your paperwork and you can write all your regulations and you can do all this, but nothing's going to change unless you face facts and face the problem. The problem here with the Ranegras Plain and the water situation started when a group of foreign nationals from Saudi Arabia who weren't allowed to do this in Saudi Arabia. That's a desert country over there. They knew all about groundwater. They knew exactly what they were doing. They came here to Arizona, got with a group of politicians. I ain't gonna describe them because I'm gonna have to use curse words to do that. Okay? And signed agreements that they can pump uncontrolled whatever they want, whenever they want, take the groundwater out. So the groundwater started dropping. The statistician, he isn't here tonight, but he had his charts up there, how the water's going down, wells are going dry, and it's going to continue. If you continue to allow these foreign nationals over there to continue to pump the groundwater unrestricted, it's going to continue. You can't stop it. You got to shut off their valve. This is America last. This is America last. This is exactly what President Trump is talking about. These foreign nationals come into our country. Now, they're not illegal aliens. They're totally legal, and they're totally lawyered up, and they know exactly what they're doing. And they knew what they were doing when they set all this up. As long as you allow Fudamonte Farms over there to keep, I drove past the place the other day, got all kinds of sprinklers going, got big pumps going. They're draining the water, but they're not the only problem. And I can understand the way you guys want to approach this, for the whole county. Okay. But the biggest problem is them right there. You need to shut them down. You shut them down and you'll save our water. If you give them the same rights and privileges as the American citizens here in this county, you're not solving anything.
So, sir, actually with that, I want to jump in really quick. Thank you for your comment. I just want to make sure we have limited time, and also we want to keep this conversation focused on the goal.
Yeah,
right?
I know you
So,
don't want to
no,
hear what
I appreciate it. I certainly
But-
appreciate the passion and the interest, but we want to make sure everyone has a chance to speak. I saw a hand back there. Yep. Thank you. And also just make sure we're focused on the goal, right? Long term, you'll notice it doesn't single any one individual out, right? This is a goal for the entire basin. I think gentleman in the blue hat.
Is this on? Okay, I'm a resident of this RV park, and I'm a resident of this RV park, and I have many friends that live here in the general area. So my concern is kind of like this gentleman here. So in a military decision-making process, you have courses of action, and you weigh each person and you weigh each course of action. So I'd ask that to clarify this slide, that you weigh what the citizens count for. You weigh in a percentage what the alfalfa farms count for. You weigh in a percentage what agriculture counts for, so that the people of this county can see how much they matter against the other people that are competing for this groundwater. Then you'll come up with a course of action, and you'll usually find out that you find 3 courses of actions. You put your small planning groups together, you come out of the room, and you adopt plan 1 and 2 and basically come up with 4. It's never the 1, 2, 3 that you think it's going to be. And the reason I ask these questions is because I'd like to know, if I invest in a small business here, are the people going to count the most? How much are you allowing these 1,259 people to grow in the next 5 years? How much have you allocated for them? How much have you allocated for the businesses that will provide meaningful input into this community? Otherwise, I don't want to spend my money here. I'll just keep it in Washington where the fish swim across the street. Does that make sense to you?
It does.
So
Thank you.
so that's what I'd like to know is if I bring money here, is it worth bringing here, or are you going to keep us at 1,259 people and favor what looks to me as an outsider industry over children's futures, so they don't have to move away from here to Phoenix to get a good paying job? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is this on? Yeah, this is on. My name's Nance Franklin, and going back to Fundamonte, they came here in 2007. So that's less than 20 years ago. When I was in the meeting in October, your scientists stated that our water was at a critical means of having to manage it. With that being said, in 20 years, Fundamonte has done that much devastation to our aquifer, so to speak, and your way of managing it is to grandfather them in to what they're already existingly using. How is anything going to change? We will not make it 50 years. So what's happening is there's a lot of paperwork. Now, are there fees involved with these registering that is involved to your business? And if so, what is your goal, your projected goal, to where you're going to be able to create something effective in the next 10 years that we can actually see progress where you're legitimate and not just another group of people wrapping red tape around us?
Yes, we'll give that one to Ben, but thank you for the comment.
I promise. Hello? Good. I promise not to make this longer than it has to be. When I went to law school, I had all the ideas, right? Because we all went, most of us were going to go. Can you hear me better now? We wanted to save the world, right? And then law school broke us, right? Because it's rough, right? There's rules that the legislature sets and we have to follow. And once upon a time, I was a staffer at the legislature. a lot of those folks really mean well. They write the best thing that they can, and then we implement it. That's our job here at an agency. We can't really change what we have to work with. So what I hear is folks saying, you're grandfathering these folks in. Yep, 100%. That's what we got, right? And, you know, I do like America, been here my whole life for a while, my family, right? One of the good things, really good things about this place, right, is that when you've got a right, it's protected. The government can't take it without compensating you, right? That's important. The double-sided coin, right? So when we give out those grandfathered rights, as we are required to do, I have no choice. That also means that those rights carry benefits for those recipients, right? I will say, however, and it's really important, that while those rights are there, and while that means that folks who are using water will be able to continue to use water, it is not unrestricted. It is not without limitation, but rather driven by this goal, or I should say, by the goal, whatever it ends up being. There will be conservation measures in place. And yes, there's bureaucratic elements to it. That's how government works. We're trying real hard to do it the best we can. But we know that it works because we see groundwater reduce, right? We drive folks to be better. And these aren't folks who necessarily wouldn't want to be better on their own, but we know that these programs can move folks towards using less. That's the paradigm that we're working in. Rights and regulations are the tools that we have. So to your question, right? Is this going to actually do anything? We wouldn't be here if we didn't think it would. What we can work with is what we've got, which is to stop new water from coming in unrestricted, to grant rights to the folks who are already here, and then to put in conservation requirements for those folks, so that whether you're a municipality or an industrial user or an agricultural user, we're moving towards less overdraft. Can't say we're going to come in and that's a favored right. That's not how it works. Not the way it's written. But what we can do is what we have. Sure, the question was, is there example, this is, I'll kick it to Madison, but do you have an example of one of the conservation programs that you would implement? We got a lot of them, right? I know we're talking about the goal, and so Olga's probably side-eyeing me, but yeah, I'll kick it to Madison just so you get a sense of what it is that gets us to the 50% reduction, if that's where we go.
Yes, we have a few, lots and lots of examples of conservation requirements. I guess the biggest one that kind of comes to mind is our agricultural base program. That is an allotment-based program for each agricultural user within any AMA. That is something that is implemented in each AMA, not just the initials, not just the subsequents, it's in each AMA. And that is truly an allotment-based program based on what historic crops were grown during the historic 5-year period of each of those AMAs. And it is reduced over time with conservation requirements involved with the management plan. So whatever has been implemented in each of those management plans, they're all a little different with their calculations, is how that's being reduced over time.
Just to put a finer point on it, right? What it's saying is, we're saying, hey, folks, the way that the base program without any modification works is we say, agricultural users, here's how much acreage you've got. Here's how much water you're allowed to use. And built into that are things like how efficient your water is, right? How much gets wasted in between the pump getting to your field and putting onto the field. And over time, we can say, we're going to require you to be more efficient. We're going to require that you lose less water. And guess what? We're not going to go and check how much you're actually using. We're just going to say you get less. So either you become more efficient or I guess you got to grow less, right? But at the end of the day, the amount that you get is reduced. That is one of many that would apply, right? Where we drive them to more efficiency by reducing the amount of water that they could use, as an example. How is that regulated? We require them to meter, we require them to report. And then if they're over, then we can take corrective action. And we can also independently audit and inspect. And if we find problems, we can take action. Well, okay. We are getting so far afield, so I'm going to answer that last question, then I'm going to kick it back to Olga. What is corrective action? We require you to come back into compliance, and if you're not willing to do that, we have serious fines that we can levy to bring people back into compliance.
Sorry. If you can go out there and set that pump off. David Bob.
I'll kick it back to you, Olga.
All right. Yes, yes, yes. I will play older sister and bring us back to the topic at hand. I think there are a few other, were there any other comments? Madison, there's a gentleman right next to you.
I got two questions. Early in Ben's presentation, you mentioned something about a local council of locals advisory. Have those details been worked out as to how they're going to be picked, who they are, where they come from? That's the first question. And second question, while I agree with the sentiment in the room and looking at the big picture, that's a long-term goal. There's also the little detail at the other end of the spectrum. Has there been any discussion, or might there be discussion with future bureaucrats in your department talking about bringing that metering and regulation all the way down to the homeowner, to the small? That's one of the reasons I live out here, is because I don't want that. I certainly want the mitigation regarding the bigger issue, but I also don't want that to fall down. Someone saying, hey, why don't we do this to everybody? So I don't know, have you guys ever discussed that? Is that part of it? Is that, it's not ever talked about?
So currently, metering and reporting is limited to non-exempt wells, right? So you're a domestic exempt well owner, none of this applies to you, right? And to Ben's point, that's the law we have to work with. That's what we currently have in our disposal. And it's not on the department, right, to change the law. That's outside of our purview. We do, like I said, we do have a general Q&A period that we're going to get to here in a few slides. Before we do that, it sounds like we're starting to get more into general questions and maybe less direct reactions or feedback about the goal. Before we move on, I just want to make sure everyone who had, wanted to speak or ask a question about the goal itself had a chance to. You have someone in the back?
Sharon Cleaver. I question is as far as the agricultural part goes, because the alfalfa fields do take up a lot of water, is there a way, or has there anything been done through legislation that says you can no longer be doing that? You can still do agriculture, you just have to change what you're producing.
That is a question for Ben.
It sounds like the question you're asking is, have there been discussions about what would amount to banning certain types of crops? Okay. Not that I have seen. I am not aware, and forgiveness from any legislator who introduced a bill I didn't read, but I have seen no committee hearings, no serious conversations about banning certain kinds of crops, right? In the AMAs. That said, what I will say is what we are looking at are ways that we can reduce water use. I'm not saying necessarily to ban types of crops, but we're certainly looking at how we move us towards less water use, but nothing that I've seen at the legislature about banning crops outright.
Just out of curiosity, in other states, when you drill your well in your property, you own your well. And in the state of Arizona, you drill your well, you own the equipment to your well, but you do not own the water. Apparently, that's because it's a moving body of water, the aquifer. So then it becomes the state's ownership. The state owns the water. If the state owns the water and Fundamonte owns the equipment, but not the water, how come the state, well, why couldn't they get more involved with taking ownership of massive wells like that and imposing a stricter regulation on foreign companies like this? If the state actually has more power over their water.
So I don't know if Ben, you want to add anything to it, but I think what I'm hearing, right, are general questions that we're going to come back to in a Q&A period. Oh, Madison, oh, sorry. We have one more gentleman right there. Yes, we still have, yes, sir. If you have or a comment about the goal, we'll pass the mic over to you. But just want to make sure again, we need to. Okay, let's save general questions until the end. We have a few more slides to get through. We want to make sure, we get everyone with the information we prepared today and get everyone here out of here on time. I know it's late in the evening and our hosts are also, looking for us not to stay too long past 8. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Madison. I'm going to go to the next one to
already
talk about the management plans.
I am already standing, so I'm just going to stay standing. Again, my name is Madison Moreno. I am the AMA Establishments Coordinator. In kind of regular terms, I mainly work on the management plans. That is pretty much my job at the department. I have lots of words on my slides, so bear with me. But right here, this is a little bit of background about management plans. Really, these are the regulatory documents that guide the management area to meet its goals. With that, there are conservation requirements that are in these management plans that push for reductions in withdrawals of groundwater. Each AMA has their own management plan. None of them are quite the same as the other, but with the initial AMAs, we talked about this earlier, they're a little more tied to that blue book right there. Everything in there was written very strictly to be guidelined in that book. With subsequent AMAs, they're a little more flexible and we can create programs that are a little more unique to the problems and challenges of the basin. The initial AMAs, those were created in 1980, like we've talked about earlier, and they are in their 5th management period. So we're not there yet. We're not at number 5. We are going to be starting at number 1. With that said, Douglas AMA has adopted their first management plan at the end of 2024. Ooh, that was a while ago. And it will become effective at the beginning of next year. We are in the middle of working on Wilcox AMA's first management plan, and that's kind of why you're going to see me a little bit more. We're going to have lots of meetings, lots of background information, lots of collaborative workshops to go over what these conservation programs look like, what you all want to include in them, what you don't think works for your basin. I don't know as much what's on the ground, what's here, as you all do. And I want your input, I want your stories. This is how we are going to create these kind of pretty books. Next slide, please. Again, lots of words. Really, the biggest things to pull out of here is that we have to adopt the management plan and the management goal no later than 2 years after the designation of the AMA. So we're on a tight timeline. You're going to see me a lot in the next coming months. We're going to have lots of meetings up here, lots of workshops. You'll hear me talking way too much, so bear with me over these next few months. These management plans, the management plan that we're going to create has to include measures for reducing withdrawals of groundwater. That's those conservation programs. Those requirements are built into those conservation programs that I and we all want your input on. And with that, they have to be as closely as practical to the programs that are set forth in that book for the initial management plans. That's where we have that flexibility to create and adapt those programs to what's going on right now. Next slide, please. Here's a little bit of that structure of where those conservation programs, what they are and what they include. We have 3 core, I like to call them the meat of the management plan: the agricultural conservation program, the municipal conservation program, and the industrial conservation program. Each of those includes regulatory requirements on water use, reporting requirements, conservation targets, flexibility provisions, and compliance provisions. These are all just the big regulatory details that are within the management plan itself, but a lot of these big overarching thing is to reduce the withdrawals of groundwater. I'm going to say that a lot over the next few months, but that's really the big goal of what these conservation programs look like. And with that being said, this is a very overarching view of what the management plans will be. We will go into really, really intense detail of what each of these programs are and have lots of meetings to go over each of these programs in the next few months. Like I said again, we're going to be coming back, so be ready to hang out with us. I will be passing it off now to Dennis.
Never get a microphone at these things. So we're going to go over the next steps, some of the references and contact information for submitting comments for the management goals, management plans, or even if you have any general questions for the AMA team. And then also the contact information. So you're going to see my information up on that screen. I know who's going to call me. I know who's going to call me the most, but I'll be there for you to answer questions about applications. If you have any questions about the goals or anything AMA related, I can either answer it or I'll pass it off to somebody who knows more than me. Next slide, please. So just a little timeline of where we are right now. So February 4th, that was when the official establishment of the Ranegras Plain AMA went into effect. That was with the second publication in the newspapers. And then we are right there at the bottom. Oh, it doesn't have the same thing. Maybe you have to click one more time. There we go. So right there, we are at the beginning of the development of the management goal and the management plan. So you guys got the proposed goal today. And then from that proposed goal, we'll go into the development of the management plan, which works towards that goal. All of the applications for grandfather rights, whether it's an irrigation, whether it's a non-irrigation grandfather right, they are all due on May 4th, 2027. That is with no exception that is written in statute. We cannot change that. Only the legislation can change that. So that will be the deadline. And if you don't turn in an application by the deadline, you are what was that slide again? Those red things. Yeah, you will waive and relinquish your right to irrigate using groundwater. So remember, irrigation is 2 or more acres, nothing below that. So you're not waiving and relinquish your house water, okay? You hear me? All right. Next slide, or actually, so February 2028, that will be the projected adoption of the management plan. That's 2 years from yesterday. And then in February 2030, that's when we're looking to put the first management plan into effect. Next slide, please. All right, so we are doing initial comments for the management goal, and we're gonna have them due by March 31st of 2026. So the end of this month, we ask that you send them to our management plans email. So that's managementplans@azwater.gov. And that will also be the email where if you have any questions and you can't remember my contact information, you can send your questions to that email, and I will also receive it there too. With today's meeting, ADWR proposed our draft management goal. And like I said before, that'll continue to be developed until it is set. After this meeting, like Madison said, you guys are going to get used to our faces. You're going to see us a lot. You might even scream at us. But that's okay. We are here for you, and we are also here to take all your comments, all your suggestions for those management plans. That's for the conservation, for the municipal conservation, for the agricultural conservation, and the industrial conservation. We'll be doing multiple workshops for all three of those facets for the management plan. I think right now we're on maybe workshop number 9 or 10 for Wilcox, with more to come soon. I go down there for the next 3 weeks. So you guys will get to see us. Next slide, please. Oh, all right, and there we go. So these are all your references for us. If you want, you can take a picture of this slide here. Like I said, that management plans email is going to be our main AMA email, where if you have any questions, you can send them there. For any information on the Ranegras Plain AMA, you can go to our website. It's azwater.gov/Ranegras-plain-active-management-area. For other AMA questions, you can send emails to earp@azwater.gov. And our customer service phone number is stated there as well. After this meeting, we are going to be posting the presentation with the slides and a recording of the meeting, and those will be found at our website as well. And who wants the mic for this Q&A? I don't want you guys to scream at me today, okay? All right. I'll take this. I got you. You get up. Leg, take that.
Actually, I have a two-part question. One about the grandfathering of existing wells that are already registered with your department. Do they have to be applied again?
I can answer that question. So one of the big misconceptions that we see is this grandfathering of that's going on in the new AMA is grandfathering the use of your well. That's actually not true. What we're trying to do is grandfather in the use of the water as a whole, and whatever wells you're using to do that, you would just include that on the application. So it's not necessarily grandfathering in or re-registering wells or anything like that. It's looking at the use as a whole that you're trying to grandfather in.
Well, our existing well now actually has a water withdrawal in the permit from the state. And so does that have to be re-registered again? That's what I want to find out. Does that need to be redone again, or is it good enough as is?
It sounds like you're talking about the well was registered with the Department of Water Resources. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So that likely happened in the 80s when the department became a thing. The department said, okay, any wells that are out there, let us know. We'll assign an identification number to it and we'll know it at least exists. Now, there are some wells out there that might not have gotten the memo. So there could be wells out there that are unregistered, but as long as you have a well registry ID, it's typically 55-6 digits. Then it's registered forever. The department knows about it, and feel free to put that on your applications for grandfathered right.
Yeah,
Okay, my second question is, you were talking about agricultural
Can I jump in real quick to
Go ahead.
help with your first question? So I think you're asking if you have to apply again, as in for this grandfathered right. Is that correct? Okay. So depending on your water use, so if you are irrigating, like our definition of irrigation, that two or more acres for plants or parts of plants, or if you're using it for non-irrigation purposes, which could be a lot of things, but, or if it's just that domestic use, really, if it's your home use and it's an exempt well, registered with the department as an exempt well, and you're not using it for irrigation, then that is okay. It is not in that line of that irrigation definition to be following that grandfathered right application. If it falls within that grandfathered right application, then that's where we would need to see that application be submitted to the department.
Okay, and the second, my question is, in particular, was really about agriculture here. I come from central Washington where I farmed in a federal reclamation project where we had assigned acre feet of water every acre we irrigated. Is that done here in the state of Arizona? And we have to pay for that water. It's not free.
So it sounds like you're saying that with the reclamation project that you have some experience with, there was an assigned amount of water that could be used. Something like that will be done now because of the active management
And
area.
also, because of our irrigation, our water table came up, a lot of wells went in, and they had to form their own irrigation district, and they pay for every ounce of water, gallon of water they take out of the ground by acre foot.
That would not happen here, at least with the department, because in the subsequent AMAs, there are not pumping fees.
So right now, there's no limitation on what they can pump out.
No, what I would say is there is a limitation on what.
And what is that in acre feet?
That's a good question. That will come as the management plan is developed. So the limitations don't yet exist, but they will. There is a limitation on acres that is hard and fast already. And then how much you can use on those acres will be set in the management plan, and it will be in acre feet, how much you can use.
Okay, that's my question.
My name is Melvin Douglas, and California had several counties that were drying up, and what they did, they created a recharge. Oh, they created a recharging process in order. How you say what they did? It rains every year. We get rainwater. It's like Arizona, it rains everywhere, and all the towns are flooding. And with if you have where you're able to catch that water and recharge it, and what they did, they went in, they drilled wells, and they perforated the pipe all the way down, and what they did, they filled the wells with rock and gravel, and they created lakes to actually catch the water. And then after the lakes got so full, then they released the water. Just that way you don't have the flooding into these like dried up lakes that where it was just hundreds of wells, hundreds of wells in these lakes, like, and it just literally brought the water table back up to 100 feet, from 100 to 200 feet. And the whole town just actually almost evaporated because there was no water. And I want to say also, even though they raising a lot of alfalfa, we get a lot of oxygen from that alfalfa. And you know, when you're flying in your airplane and you're at 30,000 feet and you drop down to you drop 10,000 feet, you just hit a pocket where there's no oxygen. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right here, right here.
Somebody behind me?
Yeah, he's back there, but I don't know if he's going to.
Oh, he might. So I have one other question. You said that people have to have their well stuff submitted by March 31st or it done by March 31st. How, did I misunderstand that? Next year. Okay, well, we have a lot of slow water drillers around here.
We've got two things we need to talk about. That's right. Someone here got it. There is a deadline for when you need to have your irrigation, or excuse me, your grandfathered rights submitted. That's next year. There's a much sooner deadline, end of this month, right?
Yes.
For your meters. Now, who has to meter? The non-exempt wells. This is kind of what we were talking about earlier here, right? If your well capacity, not how much you pump, but if your well capacity is less than 35 gallons per minute, you'll see that on your registration. If it's less than 35 gallons per minute and you're not irrigating with that, you're an exempt well. But if your well capacity is over 35 gallons per minute, or if you are irrigating, you need to have your grandfathered right application in before the deadline next year. But if you are one of those things, if you are over 35 gallons per minute capacity and or you are irrigating, then you have to have your measuring device installed by the end of this month, right?
And I'd like to go ahead and add that if you do not know what your well is pumping, or if you don't know how to find that information online, always feel free to give us a call and we will go to the ends to help you out. Brandon will. I got one over here and then I'll come up front.
Thanks, Carrie Ann. So I'm going to go back to one of those early concerns that we all have. I mean, the alfalfa is a big one, and our giant thirsty neighbor of Phoenix is another big one. And we all are watching the news and watching how CAP is going down the totem pole on the Colorado River agreement that has yet to happen. So I'm just hoping that because we have an AMA, that it would be that much more difficult for them to pass legislation to put our water in a transfer basin. And because we all know that when Phoenix runs dry, it is a little concerning that they're an AMA, because I don't see them being very successful in their water management. But I can't see all the details, but it sure does seem like they're running themselves pretty dry and still continuing to build immensely. And so I just would like to hear that, being in an AMA, that our water is at least protected to stay within this basin. And then we can argue about how that usage happens when we get that started. So that's my question.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the lady up front and then I got you.
All I can say is I don't get to vote in the legislature. We don't get to vote. So what I can tell you with certainty, what the AMA can do is it can limit new uses. It can conserve with the folks who are able to use. It provides protections for new developments. What the legislature does continues to be their prerogative, and we enact the laws they pass and not vice versa.
Hi, guys. Hi. Okay, so the AMA is in place. We know that. There's still a ton of questions that we have about how we're going to build that and put it together. And what I've heard, what I've been a part of, and everything that's been going on so far, these folks are here to give us our voice, and we do that best. I mean, Brenda, Baus, Vicksburg, man, we rock at using our voice, okay? Like, really, we do. So I know there's a lot of questions and a lot of confusion, and a lot of that's going to get worked out step by step. But I think what I'm hearing from them right now is we're putting together a project management plan, and we do that by starting at the end of the story. What does the end of the story look like? And then we work our way back. So I'd really encourage you guys to use those voices and write in and be a part of this particular step, which is let's see what 50 years looks like. Let's write the goal so that these next meetings that come up, we can put the steps that we have to take to get there. They're giving us that voice. Okay, the state could just say, well, somebody in the state's going to make all those decisions, and they're going, no, we're here at the table, we're coming back time and time and time again. We're going to build this together. You're going to have a voice. And I know we didn't really get too far in what the goal should look like, because that's kind of shell shocking for all of us, and it doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense to us, at least to me right now. But think about what that 50-year goal looks like, or is it a 40-year goal, or let's pick that end goal. Let's use our voices. Let's do what we do best to protect this basin, and it starts with having the plan. Goal first, and then we build what it takes to get there. So I hope that, we will work through all these questions, and I have all the same ones you do as well, but let's not miss the opportunity to use our voice on what the question is tonight.
Thank you. We're ready for the next one?
All right, I have a question about the long-term decisions. Are there going to be local people that are going to be on a board or whatever is going to make these decisions, or is it only people in Phoenix? I want to have local people on the board.
Okay, for that Groundwater Users Advisory Council. So the people that will be appointed to that board have local input. They are people that are drivers of the community. So people that we have in other boards and the other AMAs are people that are active in their communities. So that is something that goes through the governor's office. It's not something that DWR has power to put people on that board, but it is people who are local powers in their community.
Sorry about that. I just want to add a little bit to that too, right? So you were talking about long-term decisions, long-term planning. So, this is a long-term goal, but we talked about there being multiple management plans and each one being an opportunity for local engagement. And Madison can speak to this because Madison has been working on management plans for the department for a while, right? Each time a new one comes out, it's another opportunity to have these conversations with local stakeholders. There is the Groundwater Users Advisory Council, but there are also stakeholder groups, committees that help advise the department on industrial conservation programs, right? Municipal conservation requirements, agricultural ones as well. So there are ample opportunities between now and whenever the goal, whatever the goal timeline is, for multiple avenues, not only for folks that are appointed to the Groundwater Users Advisory Council, but also all of you all, residents, citizens of the basin, to provide that, direct feedback as well.
Exactly. We are here. I have been working on management plans a very, very long time. I actually started at the department as an intern working on management plans. It's been a long journey for me. How long ago? I've been at the department almost 7 years. Yeah, I've worked on the 4th management plans and the 5th management plans for the initial AMAs, and the Douglas first management plan now the Wilcox First Management Plan, and now with you all on the Ranegras Plains First Management Plan. Lots of process. We even went through it with during COVID and been doing virtual communication meetings with the public, and we are constantly wanting to have local input. It's extremely important to not only us, but to the process of developing this plan. So we're hoping that you all come to these workshops, come to these meetings, tell us when we have good ideas, tell us when we have bad ones. These conservation programs don't work unless you all help us make it work. So please, this local input, we say it, and I know it sounds kind of out there when I say, please let us know, please call me, please email us. Our doors, our phones, our inboxes are open. We want to have these open communication lines. So
hi, my name is Larry Ledeen. I live at the end of 42E, and our well is 200 feet deep. We bought our place in 2009. I had to put a new pump in. The static level in our well at that time was 130 feet. I just had to put a new pump in last year. Our static level has dropped to 160 feet. And my pump is set at 185 feet. So your idea of conserving water is in another 50 years, if I run out of water, that's conserving water. Because that's the way a lot of us are going to be. We're going to be out of water in 50 years.
I want to walk very carefully here. Not because I think I'm going to say an incorrect thing, but I want to treat this with the seriousness it deserves, right? I do not want to be dismissive of a question like that. The active management area is not designed around protecting, or I should say, it allows for folks to withdraw water, but it doesn't guarantee them a water level. Right. No, sir. He said that we're guaranteeing some folks as much water as they want. And that's not true, right? What we are doing is for folks who submit an application and can show that they have been irrigating certain areas within the timeline specified, that they can have a right to the irrigation of those acres, right? And for industrial users, that they can prove that they were putting that water to use for industrial purposes within the timeline specified, and that they could continue to pump, right? But we don't guarantee them that we're going to preserve a water level for them, right? So at the end of the day, there are tools that we have and there are tools that we do not have, right? And I can't say we're going to make sure that well doesn't go dry. I'm very sensitive to the concern of it, right? Those kinds of concerns are frankly why we are using the tools that we have when there was previous to now unrestricted groundwater pumping, right? So I don't want to be dismissive of it. You asked, is our idea of conserving water seeing your well go dry? No, that's not our idea of conserving water. But what we do have and what we can use is over a long period of time to set a goal for the future, and then based on that goal to put regulations in place to drive the usage of water down, right? And that's what we have. That's what we can offer.
Thank you. Do I have to touch anything or not touch it? Okay. My name's Ann Richmond. I have a very specific question. I guess it was Ben brought it up. It was the deadline for measurement devices. Do we register something? Do we What is my action item other than installing the device?
So the deadline that you're talking about is to, yes, end of this month, yeah. So that is the deadline to have a meter on your well, because in the future, when we are reporting annual water use, we're going to want the most trustworthy information possible. And if you're having to guess and all these things, eventually, if we have folks who are just guessing on their wells, we're not going to have good enough data to make better informed decisions in the future. So it's important to have meters on your wells so that you can provide us the best information possible.
Right. The answer is you do not have to show anything to DWR to show that a meter is installed. But we will expect that data when it comes time for those who are required to report. They will need to be reporting that data. So yes, you have to have a meter installed by that. Yes, that's right. If it is the case that you are a well that would be required to report. Sorry.
Thank you.
In October, when you had your meeting and we learned about the critical phase that our aquifer was in, I think the majority of people that know of all the industry that was wanting to be planted here, we were very supportive and are very supportive of you being here to help us out because we do not want to lose our water. And we are looking forward to working with you and trying to build something that is realistic and obtainable for our area. The question I have is you're doing AMAs in all these other areas, but are those are replenishing aquifers. We have an aquifer here that's not being replenished. We don't get much rainwater. So the drop is happening quickly. Are you gauging and doing your projection of goals with that in mind, that we don't have the time that other aquifers have? Ours is different. And I encourage you to really take that into account. If his well dropped, that means my wells dropped. That means everybody on this side of the room, their wells have dropped. We're all neighbors. We don't have that much time. Thank you.
I'm pretty loud, so you can usually hear me. Thank you, Nance. Okay, so on the advisory council, you spoke that it is the governor who is going to appoint the people to that advisory council. So how is that being local? Because Governor Hobbs doesn't know us. We're we're 1,200 people. We don't even have a technical town within the Ranegras Plains. We have villages, but we are unincorporated. Is there an unincorporated town here? No. So how is somebody from Phoenix, who is the governor, going to make choices as to who is going to be on that council? That concerns me.
Luckily, no, right? Luckily, it's not required that she know you or divine who you are. We, as soon as we're able, we'll be sharing the application link for folks here to apply to be on that council. Now, I'll note, its name is the Groundwater Users Advisory Council. It is not a body that's empowered to enact any regulations or laws or anything like that. It is an advisory council, and I certainly don't want to poo-poo it. We're glad to have it, and we'll be delighted to work with whoever is on that board, maybe some of you, right? But at the same time, we will not stop meetings like this and taking feedback like this. So as soon as we can, we will share the link so that anyone interested in applying can. The requirement is that you be familiar with or have an interest in water use here in the basin. So you've all met that requirement, I think. But we will also continue to have meetings like this. So even if you don't get on the council, your voice will be heard. You call us, we'll answer. You write us, we'll read it. You talk to us here, we'll respond. I think Caleb Blaschke's on there too. He's the town manager for the city of Wilcox. But your point's taken, right? It represents in Wilcox a very agriculturally heavy locale, a place where I'm a little more familiar than that's where my people are from, right? But yes, the way that it's made up will matter, but it is not, and I want to stress this, the only place to offer feedback and insight and to get involved in the process. Where are you? In Ranegras? No, sir. I grew up in the Gila Valley. That's the upper Gila River, southeast Arizona. We've been there about 150 years now, but I moved to Mesa to look for work. Unfortunately, we're still there, but that's where I'm from.
All right, so I see your question over there, and we're going to hold off on it for now because we do have one online question for our chat, and we're almost at the 8 o'clock mark. But the question is from George A. In general, would a proposed public water system be subject to overdraft goals within the Ranegras Plain AMA? A proposed public water system be subject to overdraft goals within the Ranegras Plain AMA.
A potential municipality would be subject to conservation requirements under the management plan. Yes.
All right, and I've got one last question for tonight.
Hi, this is less of a question and more of an introduction. My name is Marika MacArthur, and I'm a member of the very newly formed Water Alliance of La Paz County, which is extremely interested in not just the Ranegras Plain, but all of the other basins here in La Paz County. You're going to hear more about what we're doing and getting organized to help represent this area and working with organizations like ADWR. We are currently affiliated with ASU's Impact Water program. They are helping to set up these water alliances throughout the state because since there are no state level protections that say you can't come in here and take our water, it really is up to us as members of these communities to get organized. And that's what we're doing. That's what all of this is about, is organizing, getting regulations into place, getting everybody on board when there just wasn't anything like that before. So.
Thank you.
All right, folks. So we're a minute over 8. I think it sounds like questions and comments are, winding down a bit. I'll give an opportunity for any one last question or comment. One in the back, yes, sir.
Give me a second. Let me give you a mic so the people online can hear you.
I understand what you're trying to do, and I think all these organizations are fantastic, but how does it affect BLM land? Can you control what happens on BLM land, the state level?
There we go. Can you, okay, great. For us, the designation that matters for us is within the inside of the active management area, right? So if you are running cattle on BLM land and you want to be able to pump water, you're over that 35 gallons per minute, you're going to need to come to us, right? Or if you are farming on state trust land, right, and you want to be able to irrigate with water, you're going to need to come talk to us. That's what matters for us. If a helium plant were to come and need water for that industrial use, they would need to get an industrial right. What I would say is they need to get an industrial right. I wouldn't say permission necessarily. If there is someone who owns an industrial right that they're willing to sell, certainly that's an option potentially, right? But the idea that I'm trying to convey is that you can't just show up, you need to get a right.
BLM is a federal group, and they have land around here in our area. And this property right there on 60 and 42E, that's all designated to be solar. Solar takes a lot of water to clean off those panels. We have windstorms all summer long, dust blowing. This is a dust bowl. So where does the regulation come in with federal land?
Got it. Let me hit it a little harder then. The concern, it sounds like, is Department of Energy says this BLM land is perfect for your project, whatever it might be. Does that mean that they also need to get a right? Generally, the U.S. has been willing to comply with state laws. We are going to say, let's see your industrial right. You're missing stuff.
Oddly enough, that's not my plan this time. I could hear Cindy in the back. And so I'm going to ask the question for her so that she doesn't go home and have nightmares tonight. So, she has a 5-acre piece of property and she's got irrigation that waters the vegetation in that area, basically desert type planting, right? But it's irrigation that she has there. So she's concerned that because she has a 5-acre piece of parcel that she has irrigation on for that type of planting. Can you please explain clearly if in a situation like that, this is their home, she's watering her plants. Does that count that she has to get a meter by the end of the month and that she's then gonna have to get a grandfathered right to water her plants because she has 5 acres of land watering the cacti?
It would depend on whether or not that counts as irrigation. So remember, the definition of irrigation is applying water to 2 or more acres, which it sounds like, 5 acres, 2 or more acres, for plants, right? Cacti. Did you mention cacti?
Okay, but she has 5 acres of land. She's not irrigating 5 acres of land.
Okay.
So that's what I'd like the clarification on. It's 5 acres is what she lives on.
Mhm.
It's not 5 acres she's irrigating.
Okay. Is there irrigation occurring on the land at all?
Those little, those little
Okay.
water drip
It,
systems.
it would depend on how much irrigation is happening, right? So if she's irrigating over 2 acres of land, she can grandfather in those acres. And she would need to apply and put a meter on her well if that well is non-exempt.
For cacti. Hold on, for cacti.
Well, I'm just gonna weasel my way in here. I think what's happening right here is we've got great folks who don't want to say you're fine if you're not, or you're not fine if you are. So what I would suggest is at 8:06, we'll leave you with contact information. We'll make sure we fully understand your situation and can talk through what next steps are so that you can feel confident. That's right. Happy to we could do it over phone, however you like. Yeah. Yeah. So after this wraps up, we'll get contact information. We'll make sure we cover all the details. Thanks. All right, folks. Olga's not holding a mic, but I am. So I'm going to say, I think we're good. We're good to go. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for the good questions and even the hard ones.